If you're a writer or an aspiring writer, you know the challenge of finding time to actually sit down and do the writing. So, as somebody who has written 3 books and I teach on personal productivity and time management for a living, I thought maybe I could share some tips that might be helpful for fitting the writing life into real life. If you're new to this channel, my name is Reagan Rose. I talk about personal productivity from a Christian worldview for the glory of God. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you a 3-part method for creating a writing life that allows you to be consistent and creative and still have time for your other responsibilities. You might picture these as legs of a stool. The first one is having a defined schedule. And I know a lot of people are resistant to this idea at first. You know, they want to say, I just show up to write when the muse is upon me. It's like, no, that's not how this actually works. You have to be consistent. You have to show up day after day. That's how you get, especially a large writing project, done. If you really believe that God has called you to write that book, then you've got to treat it like it's a matter of faithfulness to God. I'm going to show up and do the thing He's called me to do, even on the days I really don't feel like it. And having a defined schedule is you deciding in advance, this is important enough that I'm going to have to say no to other things so that I can make this happen. There's a quote often attributed to William Faulkner, but I don't know if it was actually him who said it, but it goes like this: I only write when I'm inspired. Fortunately, I'm inspired at 9 o'clock every morning. Now, let me break this down a little bit further. When I say a defined schedule, I'm talking about a schedule that at least has 3 parts to it. Okay? This is, in my mind, this is how I define a faithful day. It's a day in which I do my grow time, my goal time, and my grit time. Okay? What are these things? Grow time is basically me making time for growth. For me, this happens in the morning. It's my power morning routine. If you're familiar with some of my other videos where I talk about morning routines, I spend time in the Bible. I spend time in prayer. I do my reading. I do my exercise. I plan the day. That's my grow time. And I do that first thing in the morning. Okay? So good day for me is I've done the grow time, but I've also done the goal time. That's me saying, hey, I'm going to work for an hour or 2 or 3 on the most important project. And so when I'm in book writing season, that's usually going to be the book. But other times, that's any other creative endeavor I'm working on, whether it's a video like this or a course or slides for a speaking event. That is the project of the day. I'm going to spend a good chunk of deep work on it. And then grit time is just everything else. Tasks like email, meetings, organizing stuff. That to me is a good, faithful day. So if you're curious, here's my actual schedule. And I'm not suggesting you follow the same schedule. I just wanted to illustrate this. So I'm an early riser. So I do my grow time 4:30 to 7 a.m. And I do it so early because I don't want to be interrupted. I have 3 very young kids that are homeschooled and I work from home and they like to bust through that door a lot. And so I have to find time to do these things around when I'm not going to be interrupted. I take a break 7 to 8, and that's breakfast. I make breakfast with the kids and do our family worship, and I get them all dressed and ready, and then I hand them off to my wife at 8 and say, good luck. And then I get to real work. 8 to 10, that's going to be my goal time. That's when I really shift and do 2 hours at least. Sometimes I go to 11, sometimes to 12, depending on the day, of really deep focused work. This is when I'm writing. And 10 to 11, that's going to be my grit time. That's when I'm like, okay, let's answer emails, let's return calls, let me run my errands, any of that admin stuff that I have to do to keep up. And you say, okay, that's only half a day. And that's kind of part of my point here is I take lunch after that. And then the rest of the day, it's a 4th category. I call it gift time, but it's basically a buffer I build in. Sometimes, most weeks, things do not go according to schedule. And so sometimes I'll have to move the goal time to the afternoon, or I'll have to switch things around, or I need extra time on a project. By not scheduling every single moment of my day, it allows me to have the flexibility for real life. But the important thing is that you do have a plan. And even if it's not a daily plan like this, right? For example, you could say, my schedule's all crazy, Reagan. I work different shifts. There's certain days it's going to be at this time, this time. You can accommodate that, but you create a weekly schedule. So you might say, okay, my grow time, some days it's in the morning, sometimes it's in the afternoon. right? Maybe you split it up. Your goal time, you say, I can't actually put in dedicated deep work every day of the week. Okay, then pick 1 or 2 chunks each week, right? Accommodate the plan towards real life. How much can you reasonably do? And make a schedule out of it and decide when you're going to do it. And the grit time too, plan around that. This one has a way of expanding. If I just check my email inbox when I feel like it, it will consume my day. I have to restrain the grit time. I have to say, no, I'm only going to be doing this for this time to this time of the day. Otherwise, all that little minutia is going to push the goal time aside. If you want help doing this, there's a free resource, redeemingproductivity.com/weekly. You can download a print schedule. There's also a digital version of that as well in Google Sheets. Both of those are at redeemingproductivity.com/weekly. And now you say, okay, Reagan, I'm very resistant to this idea. I like to not be overscheduled. I get it. I feel you. I too am a free spirit. No, but seriously, it's hard because you think if I overly schedule, like, isn't it going to be restrictive? What about when I'm feeling creative? No, listen, this is the idea. You're creating a definition of a normal week, and it's never actually going to go like how you planned. But that doesn't mean it's not worthwhile. There's this concept that old-fashioned sailors had, and they would call it the rum line, RHUMBLINE, rum line, and not drum line, rum line. And the idea was, it was just sailing with a constant bearing. They were saying, hey, we're going to set our direction, and that's our line to get from point A to point B. But in reality, when they actually set sail, they didn't actually stick to the line, right? There'd be obstacles, there'd be storms, there'd be different things that would come up and cause them to deviate from the path they had planned. But that doesn't mean the path was worthless. It gave them a definition of normal to return to. And that's what you do with a weekly schedule. That's its usefulness. Having a defined schedule gives you the definition of, here is my plan. I'm going to try to stick with it. And if I have to deviate, I'll shift things around to accommodate. But you have to have the starting place of a defined schedule before you can shift it around. So that's the first leg of the stool. Have a defined schedule. That's going to enable you to make time for the writing life. But the second leg of the stool is work from a prioritized list. Maybe you have a million different ideas bouncing around in your head. Maybe you have a bunch of different projects that you're in the middle of. I know for me, I write for different publications. I write for my own stuff. And when I was doing books, I was trying to juggle all these at the same time. How do I possibly do all of these? And what would happen is I would sit down, and sometimes I'd have made the time to work, and I didn't know what to work on. I didn't know what the priority was. And so what you want to do is you want to create a prioritized list. And what it's going to do is it's going to help you know what you should do next, such that when you sit down in that chair to do the work, you know what the work is. You're not fishing for stuff. And that's going to help you fight distractions as well. How do you do this? Deadlines. Deadlines are your friend. I know we don't like them. I know they stress us out, but deadlines turn the tyranny of the urgent into an ally. Deadlines help you to really focus in and finish the next thing that needs to be done instead of just waiting. Maybe eventually I'll get to it. This is one of the advantages I've said of working with traditional publishers. For a book, they give you the gift of a deadline. They give you the gift of pressure. And that has a very strong prioritizing influence on your work. But it's hard without deadlines to finish a project. Maybe you have said, I'm going to self-publish a book, and I've been sitting on it forever. You have to set your own deadlines then. You have to tell yourself, this is when it's going to be done, and I'm going to work backwards from that. This works with smaller writing things too, right? I write a weekly newsletter, I do a podcast, I do videos. Every one of those things has a deadline. And since I have people out there reading it, hopefully, it helps me stay consistent. It helps me say, hey, I said I would have this newsletter in your inbox every Thursday, so I better write that and have it done by then. And let me just say a word here for those of you who are like, hey, I want to get into the writing life. Maybe you're wanting to launch a blog or a newsletter or write a book, and you're saying, it's a someday thing. What you want to do if you want to start something, is set a launch date or a publication date and write that down first. That's your first step. Then it forces you to work backwards and figure out how you're going to get that done on time. But without that deadline in place, you're never going to finish it. Deadlines are your friend. Now you say, okay, Reagan, I'm with you on that, but what about if I'm juggling several writing projects? Well, my recommendation would be to break your projects down into fundamental units of writing, which is just a fancy way of saying make them all of a similar length. So if you write a weekly blog or newsletter like I do, the priority is kind of clear usually because you always know what to work on next. I came up in the world of blogging and it was always every week I have a new article. And so I knew the deadlines and I knew that was my fundamental unit of writing. I just need to have these done before the deadline each week. And I would use a content calendar to help plan for that. I still do that today. I use Notion for it, but you could use Todoist or Excel or just a piece of paper on the desk to plan out your content in advance and have deadlines for when they're going to be due. But what about when you have a larger project like a book and you're trying to do both at the same time? What you want to do is slice and dice, baby. You cut that larger project up into fundamental units of writing. And then what that lets you do is you can kind of take those and put them in an ordered list. I want to have this first draft of this chapter done by this date. That would be a fundamental unit of writing. And then later on, I might say I want to have the second draft of that chapter done by this date. And I want final edits by this date. So at this step, what you want to be able to walk away with is a content calendar with deadlines so that you can say, this week, I need to write draft 1 of chapter 2 and an article on so-and-so. And it's very clear when you sit down in the chair to do the goal time, what you should be writing. So we've got the first 2 legs of our stool, a defined schedule and working from a prioritized list. The third leg is measuring your progress. Measuring your progress is going to help you stay motivated. Now, at this stage, you might be expecting me to say, use word count, but I think that's actually the wrong metric for most people. There's a popular thing from Stephen King in his book on writing. He says, I like to get 10 pages a day, which amounts to 2,000 words. That's 180,000 words over 3-month span, a goodish length for a book. Word count is only marginally helpful. Maybe in the first draft stage where you're just trying to get all of the words out of your head and you're going to edit later. But what about research? What about outlining? What about editing, right? If you're using word count as your metric, when you get to the editing stage, you're going to go into the negatives, right? Because your word count is going to be deleting words. It just doesn't account for the fact that most writing happens while you're not writing, right? It happens around a drive or out for a walk, or you're discussing the ideas with a friend. How do you count that? How do you measure all of that? I would humbly submit that time on goal is a better metric. And so I use a little system just called strokes. A half an hour equals 1 stroke. Think about like the oars of a boat, your strokes in the water, right? So if on Tuesday I spend an hour doing some outlining for a project, I count that. If on Wednesday I take a half an hour walk, but I spent that time not with headphones in, but deliberately thinking about a writing project, I count that. And if on Thursday I spend 2.5 hours actually writing and maybe I wrote 2,000 words, that counts. It's you showing up and saying, I'm going to do the work that needs to be done today. This is another sheet you can download from us. It's at redeemingproductivity.com/quarterly. And it's the same process we use for quarterly goal planning in our Redeeming Productivity Academy, which, by the way, we have lots of writers in there. It's not exclusive to writers, but it's Christians who are seeking to grow in their productivity. And we have this accountability component that can help you set goals, track them, and reach them with God's glory being your primary aim for the goal. Great place to be if you want some help and accountability on your writing goals. So those are the 3 legs of your stool: defined schedule, prioritized list, measured progress. If you practice all 3 of those, you're going to be able to fit that writing life into your real life, Lord willing. Well, I hope some of that is helpful to you. And if you want more productivity from a Christian worldview, then go ahead and subscribe on YouTube or on Spotify. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next one.